Welcome back, folks. The similarities between this year's presidential election and one in the not-so-distant past. Maury, 1980.
1980 could just as well be 2016. That was a terrible time period. In 1980, we were in the midst of the worst inflation this country's ever had. Paul Volcker, who was head of the Federal Reserve Board at the time, almost every week they were raising interest rates. I remember the opportunity of getting a mortgage in those days. If you wanted a 30-year mortgage, you had to come up with 20%. I mean,
and wasn't the interest rate 17 or 18%?
They were paying you, if you had the money to invest, you could get 13 or 14% for that money, and your loan had to be 15, 16. It was ridiculous. And Carter, who was one of the worst presidents, maybe because of some of the ones we have floating around today, looking better just by comparison.
Yeah.
But this man didn't know what to do with himself. And we were really falling down. And
we had the rise of the Islamic Republic in Iran. We had the hostages being taken.
And the hostages being held. And he couldn't do anything.
We had the debacle of trying to rescue the hostages when the helicopter got shot down.
Yeah, and you're right. And we looked very weak and incapable of doing anything. And then the Republican Party came up with a nominee who was defeated by Gerald Ford a few years before.
Which really had a lot to say, because Ronald Reagan went up against a sitting president in his own party.
I know.
And took him on.
That's
and
right.
He was fought by the Bushes. Familiar?
Absolutely. History does repeat itself. But let's get to the point here. The point is the fact that Reagan, who was thought of just a third-rate, he was a governor of California, but that didn't mean very much. He was a third-rate actor. He wasn't. They were making a joke about him, the movie with a monkey, and that he didn't have an image of being a leader. He was a great speaker, and General Electric had hired him to make speeches. He was actually the guy that put Goldwater into the picture by talking about the new conservatism. Well,
and he had a connection to the people. You just liked the guy.
He was a very likable guy, but he was also extremely well-spoken, but still didn't look like he would be a great nominee for the presidency. It came down to the last month, just like we're talking now about the election, and he was 30% down. And then he started on the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal at that time we were controlling it during both.
We built it.
We built it, but then we also were sure that we were controlling it. And what was happening was that it got into the hands of individuals, and they sold it to Hong Kong, a company in Hong Kong, which had ties with communist China. And Hong Kong, they knew, was going to be taken over by China because the lease with England was up in 1996. So Reagan really was very good in propagandizing the fact that we have given away the Panama Canal, and he blamed Carter. Jimmy Carter gave away America's Panama Canal, and that started a rumble like which you would not have expected at that time.
Now let me ask you something. Comparing the two elections, was the media and the elite establishment, were they as rabid and ganged up on Reagan the way they're doing to Trump?
They weren't as powerful at that time as they were. The media, first of all, that was in a relatively...
You had 3 stations, 2 newspapers.
Yeah, exactly. The newspapers, even TV was starting to become effective, but they were more entertainment than they were political. And you still had conservative newspapers that balanced things off a little bit. So the media thing was not the factor that it is today. So nobody ganged up on Reagan. They kind of dismissed him, that he would just, going against the sitting president, didn't have a chance. So and Carter, Carter was saying the way to cure inflation is for the United States to be downsized. We're too big for our britches. Let's become smaller. Let's do it. Let's spend less on military. Let's spend less on this and that. And then the bombshell hit in 1980. Reagan was elected.
So how does that compare to the similarities to today?
Well, this is just the opposite of what's happening today. You had a man that didn't have the experience. It didn't was laughed at as being just a third-rate movie actor, and he gave leadership because people liked him, respected him, and he got great people around him, like the Greenspan situation rather than Paul Volcker. But also, he also made it desirable for America to be strong. And then he came out with Star Wars, which scared the hell out of Gorbachev, who was the president of the
Soviet Union.
And the Soviet Union, he literally got it out of business.
For Maury Beschloss, all those exceptional folks, United States Armed Forces, police, firefighters and emergency personnel, and all those who go to work each and every day to keep us safe, I'm Scott Crowfoot. God willing.